Are you really at the end of your tether and exhausted? What actually triggers your stress and your anxiety? Honestly, are you able to find your pause button? Stress, stress, stress. Are you stressed too, or are we all just stressed all the time? The impression can quickly arise on social media. Probably not without reason in this day and age. We all feel permanently stressed. Constant availability, high pressure to perform, heavy workloads, private problems, and above all, the comparison with others, constant accessibility through social media. So there are a lot of reasons that can lead to stress. Of course, stress doesn't have to be something necessarily bad. It can even drive for a short period of time. However, long-term permanent stress can lead to massive problems such as burnout. And we will now clarify exactly how you can prevent this from happening. Hello, I'm Dr. Tobias Wagel. With my YouTube channel, I would like to provide understandable and correct information about diseases, the causes of these diseases, and also current health topics. If you don't want to miss anything, then subscribe to my channel. Of course, short-term stress can naturally push us to peak performance. However, long-term stress damages us, and it can significantly reduce our quality of life. Short-term stress also leads to new ideas, for example, to great achievements, so we can say it's good. But, as already mentioned, constant stress has a negative impact on health: headaches, tension, and sleep disorders. In the long term, stress can also lead to physical illnesses such as cardiovascular diseases, high blood pressure, and mental illnesses such as burnout and depression. Therefore, stress has many consequences. That's why dealing with stress well is crucial for our healthy everyday life. And again, short-term stress may even be a really good thing, so it shouldn't be banned across the board now, but many people have problems with it. According to a health insurance study, 1/4 of Germans are regularly stressed. And that's a feeling you might have. And are you one of them too? Please feel free to write about it in the comments. To help you deal with your stress better in the future, I'll give you 6 tips to help you on your way. You are also welcome to write a few more tips in the comments so that we don't necessarily end up in burnout. Tip number 1, do you know your stresses? If you notice that you are permanently stressed and want to do something about it, the first thing you should do is identify your stressors. This is a crucial step. It's the same as with illnesses, knowing what the causes are and what leads to them. So, stressors are stress triggers, and of course these can be different things from person to person. For example, an illness, an overload at work, poor time management, relationship problems, deadline pressure, constant availability, constantly fiddling around on your cell phone, and so on. Stresses can have many faces. First of all, you should recognize, acknowledge, and accept them yourself. So in what situations do you feel stressed? And again, these can be completely different. For some people, being constantly online on social media is unproblematic, while others feel stressed. What exactly is so tiring and exhausting that you find it stressful for you? And what are the signs that you might be under stress? And if you have your personal stress list, I'll call it a tip stress list. So if you have a tip stress list, then you can now tackle the whole thing with tip 2. Tip number 2, work on your stress assessment. Once you know your stresses, that is, stress triggers, the next step is to recognize how you actually react to stress. So this is the next step. Tension is typical, but also anger, fear, and disappointment. Recognizing this in a stressful situation is not so easy. Recognize how you react to stress. But next time, try to pay attention to it when you feel stressed. You know your stresses from tip number 1, and now see how you react to them. What thoughts do you have? How do you assess the stressful situation? Not always, but often stress arises because we simply overestimate a situation. The key word is overestimating, and also catastrophic thinking. We make a small mistake and then get so emotionally involved, which happens subconsciously. It's not a reproach, but so emotionally involved that only the worst case scenario, for example, a dismissal, then haunts our minds. In reality, however, this is mostly nonsense. Therefore, always try to reevaluate any situation. Is it really as bad as it seems and as what's going on in your head right now? Do other people really perceive you as negative right now? Or do they perceive the situation as bad as you think it is? It's often just a ghost in our heads. We exaggerate it, so to speak. This study shows just how important this reframing is. And here, this is explained in a clever way. Re-evaluating stressful situations can lead to us being better able to handle and deal with such situations in the long term. Once again, stress is a feeling that we have. Deal with the situation better. Of course, you have to practice this, but it will help to eliminate stressful thoughts. Tip number 3, find your pause button. And the be-all and end-all of stress is that we recover from it and lower our cortisol levels again. Again, for a short time, stress is a good thing. It motivates us, boosts our performance, and so on. Life is not possible without stress. However, it becomes critical for our health if the stress becomes chronic and we are unable to reduce it. Eustress is good stress, but it can lead to distress, and this is bad stress. How you can recharge your tank is completely up to your preference and what is good for you. Sauna, cooking, going for a walk, sport, yoga, meeting friends, taking the dog out, and so on. You need to know what is good for you, and it doesn't matter what others say. This is very important. However, you should practice switching from tension to relaxation in a more conscious and targeted way, so that you can distance yourself from stress. For example, not thinking about work after work, but looking forward to your hobby. And I do the same. I also have my stressful day-to-day work, videos, YouTube, and social media. But afterward, I can, or try to, actively relax. Because that is crucial. One person might go to the sauna and enjoy it. The other does sport. Some meet up with friends. Try to find and explore your measures, so to speak, on how you can relax again. What can also help are clear structures in everyday life, that is, rituals. For example, fixed times for eating, perhaps always doing sports straight after work, doing a hobby on fixed days. This all takes some practice, of course. But it will help you to distinguish your stresses more clearly from your free time. Now leisure time begins, now the sport begins, now the time with the family begins, now the stress and the stresses are over. Tip number 4, eat to combat stress. Wow, you probably didn't expect this point right now. Many of us know that when we are stressed, we eat greasy sweet things, cue cravings, some dopamine for our brain. We fill ourselves up until the doctor comes and end up feeling even worse when we look at the scales. And the study on the screen clearly shows that chronic stress increases the risk of gaining weight. But did you know, and this is the interesting thing, that on the contrary, the right diet, and I will also explain what the right diet is, the right diet could help you to cope better with stress. In simple colloquial terms, there is nutrition against stress. So in this study, there is evidence that regular consumption of fruits and vegetables and foods containing omega-3 fatty acids in general can have a positive effect on cortisol levels. In other words, they may reduce stress levels. They are not miracle cures, but they certainly make a positive contribution. These foods appear to have a stress-reducing effect, or at least they have a positive influence on our own perception of stress. And the important thing is that you also have the feeling that you have eaten healthily, which makes you feel more relaxed. Admittedly, there are still many unanswered questions about the connection between stress and nutrition. It has to be said that not much has been scientifically proven. Nevertheless, my tip is that in stressful situations, you should reach for strawberries, grapes, peppers, cucumbers, and so on instead of potato chips and Coke. You provide your body with important minerals and vitamins, and even save calories at the same time. So try to eat more healthy snacks, such as cucumber sticks or something similar. Tip number 5, off to bed. Too little sleep in the long term makes us unhappy, less efficient, and ill, and of course it leads to higher stress levels. If you want to know more about the consequences of a lack of sleep, what exactly happens in our bodies, and what the consequences are for our bodies, you should watch the video above. So, lack of sleep and stress can lead to a vicious circle. We want to sleep to relieve stress, but sometimes we can hardly sleep or only sleep poorly because of the stress, because our thoughts are spinning in our heads, which of course leads to more stress. Lack of sleep or poor sleep promotes stress by, among other things, releasing more cortisol. It's really a vicious circle, and as this study shows, for example, this circle needs to be broken. Of course, this is easier said than done, but it is possible. I know many of my tips can also be said, man, what is he saying? He doesn't even know how I feel. Logical, but I can only give you tips. For example, going for a long walk in the evening. Next, leaving the screens off before going to bed. Write down your thoughts and to-dos on a piece of paper that you put next to your bed. This gives you a feeling of, okay, I've written it down and I'll look at it tomorrow. Tip number 6, exercise, exercise, exercise. The same old story, and I'm repeating myself because it's so important, not just for our cardiovascular system or our body fat percentage, but also in terms of stress. Exercise reduces stress. It has been proven to lower cortisol levels and therefore also our stress levels. Of course, this is sometimes not so easy in our busy everyday lives. But, and this is the good thing, 20 to 30 minutes of moderate exercise is often enough to wind down. That's also the recommendation for our cardiovascular system, for example. So a walk, a short jog, some cycling, or even strength training will help you with your stress. And it's definitely better than nothing. The best thing to do is to plan a fixed time for it, and now you have a fixed structure again. Remember that you should separate yourself from stresses. My personal tip on top of that, go out into nature if you have the opportunity. And according to the study on the screen, Spending time in nature actually has a positive effect on our mental health and general well-being. It sounds quite logical, you might have thought. Let's off into the forest to count leaves and trees. And what actually is stress? To conclude today's topic, I will provide some related physiological and medical information. Let's briefly explain what actually happens in our bodies when we are stressed. What is it now? First of all, stress is a completely normal physical reaction to possible threats or demanding and challenging situations. Stress was very important in evolution. There is always this image of stress from the saber-toothed tiger, and then you can run away quickly. At the beginning, the stress hormones adrenaline and noradrenaline are released. Both of them originate from the adrenal ring or adrenal medulla, and they ensure, among other things, an increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, and a rapid release of glucose, that is energy. A little later, cortisol, which comes from the adrenal cortex, is then released. Adrenal medulla, noradrenaline, adrenaline, and adrenal cortex, cortisol. And the hormone ensures, among other things, that our body's energy reserves are mobilized, making us more efficient, and even having an anti-inflammatory effect. Stress triggers these hormonal reactions in our body which help us to cope with stress. However, if this hormone system is activated frequently or even permanently, it can happen that these stress reactions no longer subside and we are unable to regenerate properly. That's why it's always important. Stress, relaxation, back down, then it can be stress again, as I said, to increase performance. But it has to go down again. A chronically elevated cortisol level, for example, can increase the risk of infection, as cortisol impairs the function of individual cells of the immune system. And if the stress reactions become chronic, that is permanent, this can also promote the development of various other diseases. For example, depression, sleep disorders, of course, and addictions. These are all consequences of constant stress, but also high blood pressure, chronic intestinal inflammation, and much, much more. So hopefully, these are really many reasons for you to take care and work on how you deal with stress. Stress is not just something we find unpleasant, but has real physical and somatic consequences for us. Of course, recognizing stress factors, stresses, and changing them is no easy task. But it's worth it so that we can continue to enjoy our everyday lives cheerfully and happily for a long time to come. What about your stress now? Are you doing anything about it? Are you even aware of it? Please feel free to comment. Thank you very much and stay loyal to me.